Hello, junkies. Welcome to Nocturnal Throwback, episode number 17, the podcast, where we re-podcast the 2007 version of Nocturnal, where I wrote a chapter, recorded it, and released it each week. We did it live! This first draft went on to become the hardcover thriller from Crown Publishing that remains available in the marketplace to this day. The move out of the lair of doom in downtown San Diego is almost complete. Whew, what a process. 2,000 square feet, 20-foot ceilings. We've been there for 5 years. It's amazing how much stuff we accumulated. It was already combining 2 offices and 1 apartment's worth of stuff into that space. And of course, after 5 years, you've got the normal accumulation of stuff as you go. Couch, chair, merch rack, storage, recording gear. Of course, I play in a band, so jam room stuff, amps, PA, basses, etc. The big old Hall of Fame full of the Sigil artifacts, and on and on and on. But we are in the home stretch. We should be completely out by Sunday, May 31st. And then 1 day of doing nothing at all. And then finishing GFL 6 final draft. So let me get back to hauling boxes and you enjoy Nocturnal Throwback episode number 17. Welcome to Nocturnal, the free podcast novel. This just happens to be episode number 17, bitches. Nocturnal is a podcast-only novel you can't buy in stores and you can't peek at the end. Written and performed by Scott Sigler. More information and more free stories available at scottsigler.com. This book contains adult language, mature situations, and lots and lots of violence. Hello, my junkies. Here we are with episode 17, and things are really starting to shape up. I got 35 minutes of pure story for you this week. But first, let me dish on you with the promo for the hardcover of Infected.
They tap into your bloodstream like tiny little vampires. They hack into your nervous system like you were a walking computer network built just for them. They flood your body with chemicals that cause fear, paranoia, and psychotic rage. It's a disease that thinks. It's a disease that talks. And if you're lucky, you die before it becomes a disease that walks. On April Fool's Day, experience the horror thriller novel Infected, the major hardcover release from #1 best-selling author Scott Sigler, creator of the free podcast novels Earthcore, Ancestor, and Nocturnal. Available April 1st, online and in bookstores everywhere. Free audio chapters of Infected are available at scottsigler.com and infectednovel.com. The disease kills you slowly if the cure doesn't kill you first.
Junkies, that sounds like a humdinger of a book, and I know you're all going to be going out to your stores on April 1st and picking that up if you haven't already pre-ordered from Amazon.com or any other online service. But because I love you guys so much, remember, that same podcast for the updated version of Infected is going to be free and will be delivered through the very same feed to which you're listening now. So you don't have to do anything. On March 3rd, episode 1 is going to magically show up. Listen in after the episode. I've got news on free Infected ringtones so I can infect your phone. I'll talk about my guest blogging for AMCTV.com's horror page. And we have 2 promos from 2 other patio fiction authors who have books coming out in print. Matt Wallace's The Next Fix and Seth Harwood's Jack Wakes Up. So listen in after the episode. Let's get into the story so far.
Hey, all you junkies. This is Chris Miller from patiobooks.com and thesecretlair.com, and this is Nocturnal so far. 13-year-old Rex Deprovdechuk is now the leading suspect in multiple murders and disappearances. Police can't find the boy, but they do have a sample of his DNA, which was sent to medical examiner Robin Hudson for analysis. San Francisco homicide detective Bryan had been staking out the house of Jebediah Erikson, thought to be the vigilante known as the Saviour. Bryan saw a man exit the house, a man that looked like the one Bryan had seen kill murder witness Marco Gastineau. Bryan's partner, Pookie Chang, tried to get a search warrant to go into the house, but he was denied by none other than Chief of Police Amy Zoe. Zoe orders Bryan and Pookie off the case, but the two men have had enough of the chief's suspect meddling. Pookie called in multiple favors, reaching out to people whose lives had been saved by Bryan. Black Mr. Burns and Big Tonda Murphy didn't hesitate. They reacted to Pookie's calls by moving quickly into place. With the allies aligned, Bryan and Pookie illegally broke into the house, instantly setting off an alarm. The house's automated security system made one silent phone call to an unknown number. As the call went out, Bryan and Pookie found a black door that led into a dark basement. Bryan had seen this door before, in his nightmares. The door terrified him, but he had no choice. He opened it and descended into the basement, as Pookie followed.
He stared at a map of San Francisco. The early morning wind danced by, strong enough to rustle the map's edges, but not strong enough to ruffle his green cloak. The sounds of nighttime traffic filtered up from 4 stories below. His ears had long since tuned out those sounds. The only thing he really heard, really listened for, were gunshots, screams, and roars. Red X's on the map refused to show him the pattern. Sometimes the pattern was easy, sometimes it was hard, but eventually it always showed itself. The sooner he figured out that pattern, the sooner he could stop putting red X's on the map. And when each red X represented a murder or a disappearance, that was important. Beneath the heavy cloak, he felt a buzz from his pager. The house. He didn't need to look at the pager to know this. He folded up the map and placed it in one of the cloak's many inside pockets. His hands did a fast, automatic pat-down. Bow tight on his back, quiver secured, all 10 shafts in place. Fabrique Nationale 5.7mm handgun secure in the holster strapped to his left thigh. 4 loaded, 20-round magazines at the small of his back. Silver-coated K-bar knife secure in the holster on his right thigh, and the flat black mini grenade strapped to the bandolier across his chest. 3 concussion, 3 smoke, 2 shrapnel. It had been a very long time since he'd had visitors. He had to get home and show them some hospitality. Bryan walked down the basement stairs, every atom in his body screaming at him to stop. His dreams, where he'd killed people, eaten people, those had been bad, perhaps the worst thing he'd ever experienced. Except for the time the cracked-out gangbanger had the gun pressed against his skull. Bryan had begged for his life, convinced it was all going to end with a bang and pain and blackness. The dreams, the stalking dreams, the killing dreams, were right up there with that delightful moment. But those hadn't been the only dreams. He'd had more. He hadn't remembered them until now, or more likely, he'd blocked them out, because he dreamed of this very basement. More accurately, he dreamed of being dragged into this basement. Hurt, wounded, afraid, bleeding, dragged into the basement by a monster. They reached the bottom of the stairs. The house alarm wasn't as loud down here. Bryan and Pookie's mag light beams bounced through the blackness. Dark gray stone blocks, about 2 feet long by a foot high, made up the basement's walls. The floor had been treated with gray epoxy, the same stuff you'd find in an auto repair shop. Stainless steel drains were spaced every 6 feet, the gray floor gently sloping towards them, flashing brightly like blinking silver eyes each time a flashlight beam bounced their way. The moving lights played off rows of orderly boxes on metal racks to his left, moldering old furniture on his right. Only about 20 feet wide, the basement ran about 40 feet to a half-dozen wide steps that must have led up to the rear entrance, the same one Erikson had used to leave the house. Something about the basement felt odd. Not the basement itself, because it felt horrifying to be there at all, like a nightmare come to life and so real, Bryan wasn't 100% sure he was actually awake. But something about the size of the basement felt wrong. "Pooks, this basement seem a little small to you?" Pookie looked around. "You mean compared to my other Victorian mansions?" "No, seriously." He looked around again. "Well, compared to the main floor, yeah, about half the size." Pookie walked to the basement's west wall and pointed to the ceiling.
The main floor keeps going on past this wall, maybe 20 feet. That what you mean?
Bryan nodded. He carefully walked towards the basement's wide rear steps. The darkness, the low ceiling, seemed to close in on him. He thought of all those bad horror movies he'd loved as a kid, where some poorly written teen would glibly enter the haunted house. He'd always laughed at those movies, wondered how some writer could think people would be so stupid. And yet, here he was, ignoring his own instincts, and walking deeper into a place that reeked of evil. He reached the 6 concrete steps that led up to the rear entrance. The dread feeling grew stronger here, much stronger. These are the steps where he brings them down. This is where the monster hauls them in for torture, for death. At the rear steps, Bryan stopped and looked back into the basement.
This is some old school Hollywood stuff here, Bry.
Pookie called from the other end of the basement.
You really think Home Slice has a secret room in there?
Yeah, it's kind of obvious, don't you think? Bryan started walking back, reaching into the shelves, past the orderly cardboard boxes, running his hands gently over the wall.
Bry, we can't stay down here much longer. It's one thing to look. It's another to get caught with your hand in the Cookie Monster.
Start looking, Bryan said. There's a door down here somewhere, and we're not leaving till we find it. Robin felt so goddamn tired. Emma was basically Max's dog now. The poor thing wouldn't even recognize her mom. Robin had been home so little lately. But she couldn't sleep. Not now. This was all just too messed up. Stone was on his way. She had run the DNA analysis on the gangland hit urine, and then on the Kleenex from Rex Deprovdechuk's house. The results were too much. Just too much. Even in the context of the crazy shit she'd already seen. Analyzing DNA in urine was a bitch, even with fresh urine, and she had a tiny sample that had been collected from puddles on dirty floors. Urine carried shed epithelial cells sloughed off from the urinary tract, but those cells and their nuclear DNA degenerated quickly. Those same cells, however, did have mitochondrial DNA, or mDNA. Mitochondria, energy-producing organelles in every human cell, were inherited only from the mother. Mitochondria were also a bit tougher than the cells in which they resided. Even a destroyed cell might have a few intact mitochondria from which she could draw mDNA. The epithelial cells in the urine samples had provided mDNA. So too did sperm cells. Robin rubbed her eyes, then reached into her lab coat pocket. Maybe just 2 more. Just to get through this analysis with Stone. She pulled out the plastic, amber vial. Dexedrine. Prescription, sure, but not her prescription. Wasn't hard to come by the stuff in the department. Cops worked ridiculous hours, and sometimes they just needed a little boost. She opened the top and shook out 2 capsules. She popped them back with coffee, then closed the vial and put it back in her pocket just as the door opened and Dr. Stone Mason walked in.
All right, my dear, I'm here, Stone said. I can't wait to see what you've got for me this time.
Come take a look, she said as she walked to the computer. She started calling up the images when she felt Stone staring at her. What, do I have a boogie in my nose or something? Stone shook his head.
I don't see one, but I have to say, my dear, that you look more than a little exhausted.
That might be because I'm not getting any sleep.
Ah, well, that'll do it every time.
I'm fine, Stone. I'm a big girl now. He nodded.
I'm sure you are. Let's just keep this job in perspective, shall we? You're pale, bags under the eyes, and you could stand to run a brush through that hair.
She reached up and felt her frazzled hair. How long since she'd taken a shower? Thanks for the compliments, she said as she pulled the hair back into a ponytail, then tied it off with a scrunchie she had on her wrist. You really know how to make a girl feel amazing. You must be a terror in the singles bars.
Singles bars? Hardly. I pick up women in libraries, the ones near rich neighborhoods. Smart, rich, and with time on their hands. That's what I prefer. Now what have you got this time?
Robin finished calling up the images. I got a request from 2 officers to analyze urine found at the crime scene of several gangland disappearances.
Disappearances, not murders?
They assume people were murdered. They just never found the bodies.
You deal with the nicest people in your job. I'm so jealous.
Tell me about it. I ran mDNA analysis on the urine and compared it to mDNA we got from saliva samples on Kyle Solar and Alex Panos.
And I'm assuming on Marco Gastineau.
Robin nodded. She was already starting to feel better. Yeah, that's right. And I found that whoever left the urine had the same mother as Gastineau and the killers of Solar and Panos.
Well, you could have told me that over the phone. Why am I here?
Because we have a sperm sample from a suspect, a kid, named Rex Deprovdechuk.
How old is he?
13.
Do the police have this teenager in custody?
No. When they went to his house, he was gone, but they have some Kleenex from the kid's room, apparently left after masturbating. That's why you're here. I don't even know what to make of the DNA results.
All right, show me.
Robin called up the picture on the computer. The picture showed 3 pairs of chromosomes, an XY, an XZ, and a ZY. Stone looked at the picture, looked hard for almost a minute before speaking.
Now, I want to make sure I have this straight. You said this is from sperm cells.
Robin nodded. Yeah, right. There should be full disjuncture, either an X or a Y. Now, I know that there can be non-disjuncture, which is kicking out both an X and a Y in a sperm cell. That can produce a trisomial embryo, one with 3 chromosomes instead of 2, and that usually means birth defects or some kind of condition. But that should only be some sperm cells, not all of them, right?
Well, that's how it works in normal people, Stone said. Although this 13-year-old boy clearly has the Z chromosome, so we really don't know what we're dealing with or what normal is for that matter.
Now do you see why I called you?
Absolutely. I've never seen anything like this.
I don't understand, Robin said. I just don't understand how the boy produces non-disjuncture for all cells.
He's not. Non-disjuncture is a temporary mutation, a damaged cell, a bad split, however you want to spell it out. You were spot on when you said it normally wouldn't happen with all the sperm cells.
But it did, Robin said, pointing to the screen. Look, all the sperm cells have 2 chromosomes, and that doesn't happen if you don't have disjuncture. But what I should say is if you have disjuncture, you should only have 1, but each of these has 2, so it's non-disjuncture across the board, and like you said, isn't that normal? Robin sucked in a deep breath. She'd talked so long she'd run out of air.
Seriously, my dear, are you sure you're okay?
Robin took another breath, then nodded. She had to calm down. The Dexies were kicking in.
You need some sleep, Robin, because you're missing the obvious. The boy is not producing non-disjuncture in all of the sperm cells. Look at the screen. How many chromosomes do you see total?
Robin didn't have to look. Well, there's 3, X, Y, and Z.
The boy can't produce sperm with chromosomes he doesn't have, so what does that mean?
She felt so stupid. She did need some sleep. Her brain just wasn't clicking. Rex is trisomal. He's X, Y, and Z.
Stone nodded. He's trisomal, obviously. And somehow when his body splits chromosomes to produce sperm, it only strips off 1, therefore leaving 2.
So it's not a mutation or a bad split. Producing sperm with 2 chromosomes, that's normal for this boy.
Did you run sperm analysis on Marco Gastineau?
Robin made sure she paused before answering. Her heart was hammering in her chest. Maybe she should have only taken 1 Dexy. No, and I'll show you why. She walked over to Gastineau's body drawer. Stone followed. She opened the stainless steel door, reached in, and pulled on Gastineau's tray. It slid out on noisy metal rollers, stopping with a little jolt when the rollers reached the end of their tracks. Gastineau's naked body lay on the slab. Robin and Stone looked at the same spot on the corpse. His genitalia.
Gloves,
Stone said. Robin handed him a pair of latex gloves. He snapped them on and started examining Gastineau's flaccid, tiny penis. The penis looked like it belonged on a 3-year-old boy, not on a grown man. Stone's fingers gently probed the area, looking for what was clearly not there. Marco Gastineau had no testicles.
I don't see any scar tissue,
Stone said.
No indication of trauma at all. My first guess, he was born without testicles. Why didn't you show me this sooner?
Robin shrugged. I don't know, Stone. Work's been piling up and I guess I've been a little, distracted. He nodded.
You do seem to be awash in not only bodies, but urine and sperm, so I can see where you might be a little distracted by that fun parade. I assume you checked the bodies of Kyle Solar and Alex Panos.
Yeah, and Paul Fisher. All three have normal testicles.
But none of those three have the Z chromosome. Gastineau does. So does this Rex Deprovdechuk,
who produces sperm with 2 chromosomes instead of 1.
While Gastineau, who also has the Z, produces no sperm at all.
Which means Gastineau wouldn't be capable of passing on the Z chromosome.
I doubt Mr. Gastineau could have sex at all, aside from the fact that he clearly can't produce sperm. Look at his penis. Horribly underdeveloped.
But Rex has the Z, and he clearly has testicles because he does produce sperm. Why?
It's gotta be because he's trisomal. The ZY chromosome people might be sterile. Might, I should stress. Gastineau might just be an aberration. But since he's the only sample we've got, and it seems clear he was born that way, that makes ZY sterility a viable hypothesis. However, we've got at least 3 individuals with ZY makeup.
Right. Gastineau and the killers of Alex Panos and Kyle Solar.
That means the ZY combination probably isn't an individual mutation. They're born that way. They have a parent that passes down the Z chromosome.
But Rex couldn't do that even though he has viable sperm. All of his offspring would be trisomal, right? Stone nodded.
Seriously, my dear, you do need to sleep. You already know the answer to this. You've already done the work.
Robin put the pieces together. She then realized she was bouncing in place and forced herself to stop. Right, the mother. They all have the same mother. She has to be the one to pass down a single Z chromosome.
And since we're hypothesizing that the ZY is sterile,
Rex, or another trisomial male like Rex, they produce viable sperm with 2 chromosomes. So he couldn't contribute to his ZY offspring. And since we know we have at least 3 people with 2 chromosomes, one of which being the Z, well, that means the mother has to mate with normal XY males. Stone nodded.
The mother's the key to the whole line.
The mother. She could be anyone. Anyone at all. And to find her, Pookie and Bryan had to capture a live Z. Black Mr. Burns checked his watch carefully, then pulled out his cell phone and called a special number that only cops know.
Direct dispatch.
This is Officer John Smith. I'm in 1971 California. Looks like a break-in. Front door is busted open. Doesn't look like anything's going on, but I want to check it out. I'm off duty, just out for a drive. Can you send a patrol car for backup?
Understood, Officer Burns. We'll send the closest car. Stay put.
The alarm had been going for about 3 minutes, and the neighbors would call the cops if they hadn't already. Dispatchers would get that call and inform said neighbors that the popo was already en route. No chance of a random car showing up now, because Pookie had already put the pieces in place. Black Mr. Burns put the phone away and waited.
All units,
Squawked the radio in car A12.
breaking in progress at 1971 California. See the man. Officer John Smith is on the scene, waiting for backup.
Big Tonda grabbed the headset. This is car A12. We're 3 blocks away on Pine. We'll be there in 30 seconds.
Roger that, Adam 12.
Weed She turned right on Octavia. The next block was California, where he'd turn right again and be at 1971 California Street. This what Pookie wanted us here for? She asked. Tonda nodded. Yes, sir. You know John Smith. That's Black Mr. Burns. Black Mr. Burns, Weed She said. I love that guy. His real name is John Smith? Man, that's boring. Mm-hmm, Tonda said. But he's real tight with a ninja. Ninja saved his ass just like he saved mine. No coincidence. That's where Pookie wants us to be. You want lights and sirens, Tonda? No. Let's just get there. Black Mr. Burns will let us know what's up. She nodded as the car turned right onto California. Frank Lanza sipped at his coffee, then set it down. He smoothed out the white linen tablecloth. Tony Fourball stood to his left, hands crossed over his belt. That put Tony's hands only a few inches from his Sig Sauer P229 handgun. And Tony Fourballs could draw real fast. With just Tony at his side, Frank Lanza usually felt safe enough. And with 4 other made guys sitting in the back of LaRocca's Corner Tavern, he should have felt invulnerable. In a situation like this, he had nothing to fear except from people who were crazy or totally psycho. The guy across the table from him was both. Dmitry Vasilov. Quite honestly, the last Russian gangster Frank had expected to see in San Francisco. Dmitry "The Nail" Vasilov was the number 2 guy in the Russian Mafia's LA outfit. Everyone expected him to take over for old man Zobakov. Zobakov was in his 80s after all, and he couldn't last that much longer. Lanza's father, in fact, had gone to war with Zobakov back in the day, driving old man out of San Francisco and into L.A. Zobakov had taken over there, flourished, and now led the Russian Mafia's West Coast operations in L.A., Sacramento, San Diego, and up until Lanza arrived, San Francisco. Vasilov was tapped to take over the entire operation. All of it. Yet here he was, alone, unarmed, sitting down to coffee with Frank Lanza, where if Lanza wanted the man dead, all he had to do was say the word to Tony Fourballs. But that was not how things were done in a respectable business. "We have no wish for war, Mr. Lanza," Vasilov said. "I am merely here to pay my respects." "Respects to what?" Lanza said. "We're a small operation, Dmitry. We have North Beach. Nothing that significant." Dmitry sipped his coffee and smiled. When he did, the diamond on his right front tooth glinted in the low light. His white button-down shirt was open at the collar, showing the top of a skull tattoo done in blurry blue ink. The top of the skull crested just below his Adam's apple. "You are too modest, Mr. Lanza," Dmitry said. "Our information says something different. As we hear it, you're making a move on the entire city." "Your information is incorrect." Dmitry shrugged. "We know tongues and triads are still strong, that you won't try to wipe them out entirely. If you are smart, like the old man says your father was smart, you'll leave them alone, because it's not worth war with savages. The smaller gangs, they're either gone or now suddenly have new bosses. Italian bosses. Word is even that the blacks in Oakland are cleaning up their act, cutting back on the drive-bys. Seems some of the more violent ones, they just aren't around anymore." "That's the breaks. They lead a violent life." "As do I. But I have no wish to just disappear. The old man, he says something similar happened back in the 70s. He said gangsters just started vanishing. You show up in San Francisco, and soon after it starts to happen again. And it happened to some of our people." Lanza spread his hands in front of him. "I can assure you, my men didn't touch your men." "But someone did," Dmitry said. "The old man, he says it is no coincidence." "Please convey my respects to the old man," Lanza said. "Believe me when I say we have no wish to go outside of the Bay Area." Dmitry shrugged again. "Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you have someone helping you out, someone very good. Maybe we find out who that is. The old man, he never did find out. But I'm not the old man." Lanza nodded. That much was true. The old man, he kept things quiet and calm. He'd shredded the L.A. La Cosa Nostra, gobbled up huge chunks of territory. He'd managed to hold on to most of that territory through the rise of the Bloods, the Crips, the Latin Kings, the Mexican Mob, and a host of other nasty organizations. The old man did this with highly targeted hits and meetings. Lots and lots of meetings. Quiet ones. The old man had learned that tactic from Frank Lanza's father. Killing is messy. Treaties, even temporary ones, allow both sides to profit. Dmitry, on the other hand, had the subtlety of a chainsaw. Rumor was Dmitry was ex-KGB. When the Russian military downsized in the 90s, Dmitry was out of a job. The Russian mob brought him in as an enforcer. It was just a lateral move for Dmitry, really, beating and killing for one gang instead of the other. He quickly gained a reputation for both putting himself at risk in assignment and for taking any assignment to its ultimate level. Dmitri didn't just kill you. He killed your whole family. Kids, spouses, parents, nieces, nephews, grandparents, aunts, uncles, anyone he could find. Sometimes even friends and neighbors. He was vicious, but he was also ex-KGB, which meant he was smart. When he came out west to join up with the old man, Dmitri scaled back a little bit. Now he only sometimes killed the entire family. And that threat was enough to make the whole West Coast terrified of him. "I'll be in touch, Mr. Lanza," Dmitri said. "We're not happy about our people, but that's business. If the old man, he says we need to work with you, then we need to work with you." Dmitri offered his hand, and Lanza shook it. The Russian walked out without another word. Lanza drummed his fingers on the tabletop. "That's it?" Tony Forball said. "The Russians give up San Francisco just like that?" "No, Tony. It's not going to be that simple. They sent Dmitri for a reason." "Why? 'Cause he's fucking crazy?" "That's one of the reasons. But the old man, he was driven out of San Francisco by my father. The old man sent Dmitri to take care of things here. He made Dmitri sit down with me, 'cause the old man wants me to know who's pulling the strings. It's not just revenge for what happened with my father. They made this an all or nothing for Dmitri." "Well, what do you mean? He takes over when the old man dies, right?" "Yeah, that's right. If he gets San Francisco back first. I'm guessing that if Dmitri doesn't pull that off, he's not taking over anything." "Shit," Tony Forball said. "Flag of truce be damned, boss. Maybe we should have just whacked him." "That's not how we do things, Tony. Besides, this is some old school stuff. The old man, he's putting it all on the line. If Dmitri boots us out of here, Dmitri gets the whole ball of wax. No one will be able to argue with that. If we don't give anything up, if we beat Dmitri, then the old man will walk away from San Francisco. The Bay Area will be ours for good. But if we grant Dmitri a meeting, and then we whack him at that meeting, then the old man will send everything he's got. Our special friends, they're good at night, but if we have 100 crazy Russians shooting anything that moves, well, our special friends can't really help us all that much." Aggie James hadn't always been a piece of shit homeless bum strung out on heroin. Once upon a time, in fact, he'd owned a little counterculture internet cafe. He'd attracted a certain anti-establishment clientele. All kinds of people wandered in. But after seeing the giant "Fuck Starbucks" mural painted on the wall behind the coffee counter, people either smiled and stayed or frowned and left. He'd run the place with his wife and his teenage daughter. They'd both died in a robbery. Aggie had been the first to get shot in that robbery. Shot twice, in fact, once in the leg, once in the chest, point blank. He remembered dropping to his ass, back propped up by a stool leaning against the coffee counter. There was blood everywhere. He'd been unable to move, even lift a finger, but he stayed conscious. He stayed conscious enough to see his wife get shot in the head. He stayed conscious enough to see his daughter run for the door. Long enough to see her shot in the back before she could reach it. Long enough to see her crawling across the floor, bloody hands reaching for the door, her voice begging for Daddy to please help her, please. Long enough to see the gunman kick his daughter over with his boot. Long enough for him to see the gun pointed in his daughter's face. Long enough to hear her last scream, and long enough to see her shot in the face. Then Aggie James had finally passed out. Memories like that didn't fade. Except, of course, after you've done heroin for about a month straight. Then you forget everything. Almost everything. Aggie had done so many drugs, and for a lot more than a month straight. No reason to live, and not enough guts to kill himself. He'd gone for the slow route to the grave. The painful route. It's what he deserved, after all. He couldn't save his own daughter. If a man can't protect his family, does he deserve to live? Aggie had thought not. So for the past 8 years, he'd waited for death. But that was before the White Dungeon. Now, Aggie James waited for his chance to live. More people had been brought since his last visit with Hillary. 2 Chinese dudes, or maybe they were Korean, whatever, dressed in nondescript jeans and button-down shirts. They were cut up pretty bad. One had a bullet wound in his right shoulder. No one had bothered to dress it, and why should they? He probably wouldn't be around that much longer. There were also 3 young brothers, dressed in torn-up satin jackets and saggy jeans that must have cost $300 a pair. He recognized one of the black men as a member of the Oakdale mob, which meant the other 2 were probably in that same gang. The Oakdale mobsters looked like they'd been in a hell of a fight. One of them had a ragged, bloody stump of a left wrist where his hand had been not too long ago. All 5 of the newbies, the Chinks and the brothers, were passed out from the beatings. The Mexican was on his knees, rocking back and forth, praying to Jesus. That's all he really ever did. The new cellmates made the white room a little crowded, with 7 collars occupied. But there were still 5 more empty collars. Always room for 1 more. The gate opened, and the little men came in. They headed straight for the Mexican, who screamed in terror. One of the Oakdale mobsters sat up and scrambled backwards to the white wall. The other 2 Oakdale bangers and the Chinese, they were so beat up they didn't wake, and if they did, they didn't bother to move. Aggie could see the little men close up, and not just see them, but his mind felt clear for the first time in years. Clear mind, body free of shakes, belly full of one of Hillary's sandwiches. Aggie James could actually process what he saw. The robed little men weren't really little men at all. They were misshapen men. He knew that from Yee's battle. Watching the little men walk in, it made more sense how they moved, and Aggie tried to mimic it. He bent at the knees until the tops of his thighs touched his chest. That put his hands palm down on the floor. It was a strange thing to do, imitating the little men while they came to drag the Mexican away, but he had to do something besides just watch, or he'd go fucking crazy watching yet another person get dragged out of the cage, wondering when his turn was next, and any piece of knowledge he could get might give him the chance to live. As the little men closed in, swarming around the pleading, begging Mexican, Aggie experimented in walking with the adopted posture. It wasn't easy. He could only take shuffling steps, bouncing up a little to slide his right foot forward, coming back down, bouncing up again to move his left forward, the whole time catching his balance with his hands on the floor. Kind of like a duck walk. Bent over like that, he had to crank his head back just to see forward. That's why the little men had their heads jammed into their shoulders like that. They could look forward while bent over and walking. If they were to stand straight up, which Aggie wasn't even sure they could do, the little men's natural head position would have them staring at the ceiling. The little men waddled, but with much more efficiency than Aggie could muster. But he knew the reason for that as well. Their feet were much longer, and so were their toes. The feet, from the heel to the balls behind the toes, those were basically like a little foreleg. And the toes themselves, they were long enough to be a whole foot. But how could they be shaped like that? How could all of them be shaped like that, move exactly the same? The Mexican fought, but he was no Johnny Yee. The little man hooked his collar and dragged him out of the cell. The white door clanged shut. "Yo, old man," the gangbanger said. "Man, what the fuck is going on here?" Aggie looked at him. The kid couldn't have been more than 23. Kid was scared, but he was still strong. The kid obviously thought he could find a way out of this, either by talking, fighting, or paying. "You use it, or you just sell it?" Aggie asked. "Man, I make my money selling this shit. I don't use nothing." Aggie shrugged. "Well, then you're fucked." The gate swung open again. Hillary came through. This time, she had no cart. She walked right up to Aggie, ignoring his new cellmates.
"Are you ready to see why you must help me?"
Aggie nodded. Yeah. Well, what do I have to do?" Hillary smiled.
"We have to go see Mommy."
Bryan had felt behind every box, from the back of the basement all the way up to the middle. He'd lifted every box up off the shelves, pulled every inch of shelf racks, pushed on every stone. Pookie had did the same. So far, nothing. But there had to be a way in. Bryan moved a box of tax information from 1985. Behind it was a bowling trophy. The bowler's gold head was broken off. His gold arm was swept back in a freeze frame of perfect form. Front arm extended, right leg down, left leg bent and back. Bryan reached in and pulled the trophy. Both men heard a metallic spring. The whole shelving unit, 4 feet wide by 6 feet high, slid open without a noise, without even a hiss of air. Bryan and Pookie pointed their guns into the darkness beyond. They gave each other a quick look, then slowly stepped through. For a second, they couldn't make it out. Then Pookie's flashlight beam locked on it. "Oh, fuck!" Pookie screamed as both men started firing. And there is episode 17. Not gonna lie to you, episode 18 is gonna be one of the most action-packed episodes I have ever done in any podcast novel. So I think you guys are getting into the story now. Now is a great time to go expose other people to the story who may not have experienced it yet, because we're all the way through to episode 17. That's like 12 hours worth of pure listening enjoyment for anybody that you want to turn on to Nocturnal. And anyone you turn on to Nocturnal now is probably going to get converted for Infected. Then they'll listen to Infected, and hopefully they'll go buy Infected. I'm getting pretty jacked up. Infected release is coming up April 1st. Hopefully you guys are excited about it too. It's a real coming out party for podcast fiction. It's our chance to prove not only just to Amazon.com, but to all the book chains, Barnes & Noble, Borders, Powell's, everybody, the whole publishing industry, that giving this stuff to you all away for free, letting you all figure out what you like and what you don't like, then going and making your purchasing decisions from there, that this model is where it's at. If Infected does good, there's going to be a crap load more free fiction coming your way. If Infected doesn't do good, it's still going to take a couple of years, but this is our moment. This is our chance to grasp the moment and really show the whole world that user-generated content, free content online, podcasting your fiction, blogging your fiction, all that shit adds up to sales. It's our chance to show the world that it all adds up to sales. And you guys know how business works. If Infected sells and people are watching and it sells because we gave crap away for free, there's going to be a lot more free crap coming your way. And you guys are going to have more power as consumers to put in your vote for what content you think is really good, instead of just accepting the horse shit they've been throwing down our throats for so many years. If you want to help pimp Infected, there's 2 ways to do that right off the bat. Number 1, scottsigler.com/ringtones. If you like ringtones, turn your cell phone into a weapon of mass conversion for Siglerism. That's right, let me infect your cell phone. I've got the full promo you heard at the beginning of this episode as a ringtone, plus there's book cover wallpapers for Infected. I've got the triangle voices saying "feed me" as a ringtone. I've got Perry's Discipline as a ringtone. You guys can get that. If you do have a podcast or a blog and you want to play that same promo to your audience, I will include a link to the Infected promo in the show notes of episode 17 over at scottsigler.com. In other news, I'm guest blogging for AMCTV.com's Horror Fest page. I opened up with a little blog about what's wrong with the Academy Awards. Why is horror missing from the Academy Awards? And what would it mean if horror was in the Academy Awards? Of course, we do that Sigler style. We do that, General Siglerissimo. He gets into the whole thing and gives you a real taste of what the Academy Awards would be like if somebody with a really big ego was responsible for the whole thing. I think it's pretty funny. People seem to like it. I will also have that in the show notes for episode 17 at scottsigler.com, or you can track it down at amctv.com. Please stay tuned for the 2 promos coming up for Matt Wallace's The Next Fix and for Seth Harwood's Jack Wakes Up. Seth recorded a special promo just for you junkies. I hope you guys dig the first episode of Infected that's coming down this same feed tomorrow. I hope you enjoy Nocturnal episode 18 and hope April 1st is penciled into your calendars. Catch you for the next episode.
Consider this promo a controlled substance. Only one drug can bring the visceral and the sublime together in a single trip. With the best and the worst of the human drive, boils down into a tech-noir concoction that's half street-level heaven and half the fiery beauty of hell. From Matt Wallace, Parsec award-winning author of The Failed Cities monologues. This is The Next Fix. Kick back to the strains of Earth's last top 40 as the final human DJ sends a shout-out over the last frequency. Step into the hard-boiled beauty of the lusting corridor where that which once escaped a man is met again. Tool up with a lone cop who polices the terrifying carrion underground of the future as you seek the end of flesh. Experience one of the most unique and captivating imaginations in fiction today, collected for the first time anywhere in print and featuring 12 original stories and one full-length novella. The Next Fix by Matt Wallace. Pre-order your copy today in limited edition hardcover from apexbookcompany.com and have it personally inscribed by the author himself. Are you ready for The Next Fix?
Hey junkies, what's up? It's your boy Seth Harwood here to tell you about Jack Wakes Up out in print on Amazon and the Palm Sunday event to have everyone buy it on March 16th, Palms Sunday. To rocket Jack Wakes Up to the top of the Amazon charts, send a huge shot across the bow of Big Publishing, Part 2, and let everyone know that Jack Wakes Up is here to dominate the crime fiction world. That is 2 weeks from today on March 16th, Palm Sunday. More information at SethHarwood.com, where you can also find my new podcast, Jack Palms 3. Palm Sunday, Amazon.com. Bring it, daddies.
You have been listening to Nocturnal, written and performed by Scott Sigler. For more information, go to scottsigler.com. All music in this podcast provided by Uncrowned off their album Devils and Angels, available now at the iTunes Music Store.